So a report from Puck, the publication, claimed last week that Kathleen Kennedy, president of Lucasfilm, shepherd of the Star Wars franchise, was planning on stepping down as head of Lucasfilm by the end of this year. And it seemed like, it seemed to be semi-confirmed, because the Hollywood Reporter, for example, talked to a source and they confirmed this information. What was weird, though, is that she then later publicly discredited this rumor. And Deadline ran an interview with her, but it started with this long preamble, basically calling out the reporter from Puck, basically being like, that guy has had it out for Kathleen Kennedy. And predicted something similar last year and nothing happened, blah, 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 blah. And then they go into this lengthy interview with Kathleen Kennedy. And speaking to Deadline, she said, quote, "The truth is, and I wanted to say it loud and clear, I am not retiring. I will never retire from movies. I will die making movies. That is the first thing that's important to say. I am not retiring. What's happening at Lucasfilm is I have been talking for quite some time with Bob, meaning Bob Iger, and Alan, as in Alan Horn, about what eventual succession might look like. We have an amazing bench of people here, and we have every intention of making an announcement months or a year down the road. We are in lockstep as to what that's going to be, and I am continuing," end quote. Though again, it's weird because so many other publications picked up the story. And seem to, in the Hollywood Reporter's case, seem to confirm it on their end as well. So this is a weird. So either these sources were misinformed or misunderstood, or this is pure PR spin. Just a little bit of background on Kathleen Kennedy. Again, a lot of people forget this because most people didn't know who she was until she took over Lucasfilm. I certainly didn't. But, she's a very accomplished producer, along with her husband, Frank Marshall. And she's produced, and executive produced especially, dozens and dozens of projects. And here's just a very small selected list of films that she was the active primary producer for, or one of the primary producers, including, but certainly not limited to, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, The Color Purple, Hook, Jurassic Park, you're seeing a Spielberg trend here, The Bridges of Madison County, Twister, The Sixth Sense, War of the Worlds, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Lincoln, and more. And Lincoln was really the last big one until, she took over Lucasfilm and basically focused just on Star Wars and to an extent Indiana Jones, right? Again, like I said, she became co-chair of Lucasfilm in 2012 along with George Lucas, and then shortly, just a few months later, she became the president of the company once it was sold to Disney. And she's currently 71 years old, right? And she's been in the role for over a decade, right? For context, Bob Iger, I think, is 74. These people need to retire, right? So I'm not trying to age shame or be ageist, especially to a woman, but I feel like, it would make sense that she's entering the sunset part of her career, right? And whether this is true or not, right? Because part of me was because I was going to do this as a story, and then she came out and publicly was like, this is not true. I was like, should I still do this story? And I decided to do it. And the reason why is I think the story is not that she might leave, but the story is that this rumor sparked so much, the fact this was a major story that all the trades were reporting on, speaks to her tenure as president of Lucasfilm, right? She's been heavily criticized for how she's handled Star Wars. And it's weird because it's kind of like me being political in the way I am, where I'm viewers, I try to make this very clear up front. I'm very, very far left. The Democrats are really conservative to me. So sometimes I'll be criticizing Democrats and Republicans will agree with me. And I'm like, yeah, but we're not agreeing. We're saying the same thing, but for very different reasons, right? That's how I feel about Star Wars, Kathleen Kennedy, because a lot of the hate, or the most vocal hate for Kathleen Kennedy, is really coming from misogynists, right? Who blame her for making the franchise woke, quote unquote, which again, if you've watched this channel before, you know how I feel about this, that making the casting of something diverse does not make it woke, right? It's pushing a political message. But Star Wars, if anything, it's become less political than it was back when I was growing up with the prequels and stuff, right? So when people say political, they really just mean seeing people of different genders or ethnicities. So is the message just black people existing? Is that the message, and you don't like that message? Like, people wouldn't say that, but like when you really just parse everything down, it begs the question of like, well, what is really the political messaging that you're upset with here, right? So that's not why I don't like Kathleen Kennedy. My issue, and a lot of more reasonable people have pointed this out, is just I've criticized her just complete lack of creative vision, right? Famously, the sequels had no clear roadmap of what they wanted to do, which is just fine, but you should at least have an idea, and then you can break away from it, where it seemed like they really were just kind of doing whatever felt right in the moment, and so many projects have felt very corporate-y and very safe. And there was something kind of, charming about the old Star Wars canon, where that, the quality varied, and, the level of canonicity wasn't always consistent. But because of that, it was like the sandbox, and some really interesting stuff could be made. Whereas now, the new Star Wars canon under Disney is very, like, synergistic, and, like, very, coordinated when it comes to marketing and brand, but not coordinated in terms of like, what is our vision for this world and these characters, right? Famously, so many Star Wars projects, it's like a running joke, Star Wars projects getting announced, and then either quietly or sometimes even explicitly getting canceled, right? And to be fair, a lot of this critique, so a lot of her tenure has been highly scrutinized, and sometimes unfairly scrutinized, right? Because at the end of the day, they're not curing cancer. It's Star Wars. And I say this as one of the biggest Star Wars fans. Star Wars is the reason why I'm interested in not just films, but just stories, right? But I have to understand it's not curing cancer. So the amount of attention that the corporate maneuverings of this franchise, the fact it's been so heavily commentated on, right? Like, people have built careers out of being like Disney Star Wars haters on YouTube, right? Because they know rage sells, right? So again, but nevertheless, I think everyone can agree that, at least creative, because of course the sequel trilogy did make a shit ton of money, right? It obviously dwindled from film to film, but I mean, the first move, the Force Awakens becoming, like, I think it's like the second or third highest grossing movie of all time. Like, that's an accomplishment. But at least from a creative standpoint, I think everyone can agree that this was, a big missed opportunity. So I think why the story, why this became a story, even if it ends up not being true, is because it's exciting to think about where the franchise could go if it's in the hands of someone new. And in a lot of ways, and maybe this is like the Sisyphean, right? Who's the Greek hero guy who pushes the boulder up the hill? Perhaps this is like a never-ending cycle, because this is kind of like how Star Wars fans felt right up until the Disney buyout, where people being like, if Star Wars could just be wrestled away from George Lucas, it could be good. But nevertheless, it is exciting to think about, like, because then it becomes a hypothetical limitless possibilities rather than something that is real and tangible that exists, right? So Hollywood Reporter notes that Star Wars Celebration in Tokyo this April is expected to showcase the future of the franchise. So maybe that's where she'll announce her retirement, or if they announce it before officially, then maybe they'll announce who's going to take over for her, right? Speaking of which, who could take over? It could be Dave Filoni, right? The co-creator of Clone Wars, and he's creator of Rebels, and has worked with Jon Favreau on The Mandalorian. To that end, Jon Favreau maybe could be the one. But the issue, though, more so Filoni than Favreau. But, the thing about Star Wars is that you need someone who can handle both the creative and the business side, whereas Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are more like directors and writers. So it would be an interesting, maybe it would be better if they picked like one creative and one more business person, right? Another name that's been thrown around a lot that it feels like it would be like an obvious easy choice, but maybe like too easy, would be someone like Kevin Feige, right? Obviously the mastermind behind the MCU. Disney might go, okay, well, he made that a success, let's just put him over here. Which, A, it was successful, but had a shelf life, because we see the MCU is really struggling to win over fans. But also the MCU is just a completely different beast, right? Whereas comics, it's baked in to have a bunch of these parallel storylines happening all over the place. And, you know, the idea theoretically is that knowledge of them all enhances your experience, but it shouldn't be required reading. Star Wars is just a different beast, right? And if anything, the issue with the new approach to Star Wars has been that it's tried to be too much like the MCU, right? So I don't know if that would really work out. But again, there's this sense that anything else would be better than what it is now, if for no other reason than just it would be a new direction. There was an IndieWire article, written by Christian I apologize for mispronouncing the name, Blauvelt. And the article was titled, quote, "If the Kathleen Kennedy era at Lucasfilm is ending, its legacy is unfulfilled promises and unfair expectations," end quote. And I think that sums it up perfectly. That, there was a lot of hope in 2012 that really was not capitalized on. But at the same time, I think our expectations were a little too high, because Star Wars is like my favorite, like The Empire Strikes Back, Revenge of the Sith. Like, these are like my favorite movies ever. So it's a pretty high expectation to be like, oh yeah, Episode 7, if it's not one of my favorite movies of all time, it's a failure, right? So, I don't envy her job by any means, but there's definitely things that could have been done way differently. And there's also just things that, no one was going to be happy with. And a lot of the hate that she gets is because she's a woman and the franchise has necessarily gotten more diverse during her tenure, which again, I think is a good thing all around. You just got to make good movies to back it up, right? You got to make it so misogynists and racists, they can't point to the quality of the movie, right? They have to purely rely on their own prejudice. They can't be like, yeah, look, and the movie sucks. Wow, what an interesting story. I'm sure you have some thoughts about the topic, so comment below, let me know what you think. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really, really helps people find the channel and makes me feel all warm inside. Until next time, I'm Peter Mancuso. Peace out.